Good morning. It is truly a messy bun manifesting kind of day, y'all. My hair, I just can't with it. I mean, it is, even this humidity is crazy. So it's summertime if you're watching the replay. I'm Soul Coach Michelle, your friendly neighborhood super woo and soul coach. I support women, woopreneurs, and spiritual side hustlers to break the matrix, escape their corporate cube farm, and begin to co-create soul-aligned work for themselves. So welcome to the Soul Coach Studio channel. I'm so excited that you're here. If you love what we're doing here, go ahead and subscribe, click the bell, all the business. Okay, let's talk about what we're going to talk about today is how to kind of navigate being a woo in the muggle world. Because I don't know about you, but have you ever had, some of your muggle friends, maybe family, ask, what do you do for a living? Or, because that's like when you go to a gathering of any kind, and you don't, and it's not full of just straight up woo people. It's always like one of those things is like, nice weather. What do you do for a living? That kind of thing. Or maybe you find yourself practicing your work and muggles are asking, like, how do you do that? They might be woo adjacent kind of people where they get it, but they're not knee deep in it like the rest of us. So I wanted to create a video because this kind of came up recently in a conversation. So one of my besties and I were talking because she is an animal energy healer who also works mostly with horses using PEMF waves to balance energy. You know who you are. And we were talking, and even though her equine clients love what she does and they just innately understand like what she's doing as far as like knowing where to put her PEMF stuff, and also some other things like what they might need to nutritionally have so that they feel better and their energy level shifts and become more healthy and energy is moved through them so that they can feel better as they're working with their human riders and their fur parents. But the funny thing is, like, she recently had one of the fur parents be like, how do you know where to put the things? Like, how do you know that it might be a knee problem? My vet hasn't even said that. But after she's done, everything works a lot better. So they just like, how do you know what is exactly needed? So it kind of made me think about, first of all, I bet a lot of muggles will ask us woos questions like that. And, when we're working, when we're seeing stuff, when we're out someplace, if you're at someplace like there's a woo conference, obviously everybody knows what's going on. But when you're at a gathering for maybe your day job or your partner's, a social gathering for your partner's day job, or you're just out at some, in line at the grocery store, I don't know. And people might ask these questions. It's very strange. Or like at Christmas or a holiday of some kind. So it's super easy when you're talking to people that get it. But a lot of times when we're talking to muggles, we kind of get that. That's why we feel socially awkward. I think that's where a lot of it comes from, because it's like, well, how do I even speak to this person who I don't know if they get me? I don't know if they get my stuff. I don't know if they're open-minded about it. I don't know if they're closed-minded about it. But I want to kind of address all that stuff. So in speaking to someone, you're not sure of who they are, but you know that they're a muggle, sometimes it just takes a little extra social skills to explain things in a way that keeps them fascinated. Because usually, like, what happens is they might know you do some stuff, or they might be fascinated when you say things, and part of them isn't necessarily comfortable with what they've heard about our belief system. So to keep them fascinated and comfortable, I want to talk about how do we do that? How do we do that? And eventually you might actually turn those folks into clients of yours, which is really fun and really interesting, because the whole point is we want to be here to celebrate and shine our light and help people heal so that they can be on their journey in a way that is really feeling good for them. But I want to be really clear before we go any further though, okay? I am not saying hide your gifts. I'm not saying for you to play small, for you to go back in the woo closet or the magical closet to hide away so that other people feel better. What I'm trying to say is it's more about how you can share your light, share what you do, share your healing gifts and what you believe with others in a constructive way, so that the ones, especially most of the time, this is going to be people who love you, who care about you, who are interested, maybe relatives or friends and stuff like that. So they're truly fascinated by what you're doing, and they just want to understand better. And like I said, you might gain a client or two from this. So, I find as a woo person, my social skills are often put to the test in those muggle situations, like I said, because I'm not really good at small talk. Like, I can get on here and talk all day long about woo-woo shit. I can talk all day long about interdimensional uh, tr- astral travel and clearing your energy and manifesting and how all that works and all that kind of stuff. But like you go into like say the cocktail hour for your office and you're not gonna probably talk about that kind of thing. Or at least if you did, they'd be like, especially when I was working in, Muggle law, like regular old law office or corporate legal department. I was very grateful that a lot of my colleagues were woo adjacent. So when I got to kind of like the end of my career, where I was much more comfortable being my authentic self in the workplace. I had crystals on my desk and stuff, and people would ask questions, but they were truly interested. But in all honesty, I really am not a fan of being in those kind of like situations where you're the only woo in the room because you just feel kind of really weird. And I personally am always much more comfortable in a circle of close, like-hearted friends with a cup of tea and a deep topic to chat about. I mean, that's just golden. But we can't always have that. So we have to kind of think about how are we going to deal with these woo adjacent folks? And that's probably not the best way to phrase it. How are we going to navigate supporting the woo adjacent? So and I did not come up with that term. A colleague of mine, Coach Jenny, came up with that term because it's people that maybe are not practicing woos. They maybe aren't necessarily down with the belief system, but they kind of get it and they are open-minded enough to where you can sit next to them and have an open discussion where they're not going to say, well, that's wrong or whatever. They're woo adjacent. Like they get it. They understand you. They accept you. Usually that's kind of the minimum that's going to have to be to kind of get this. And that's usually the person who's asking questions like about like, here's what I heard. Is that true? So I want to talk about the Muggle perspective for a minute so that we can really kind of understand where are these folks coming from, because at some point they may be seeking support and need your help and your light and your healing modalities, but a lot of times they're afraid. So frequently with that kind of situation where they're fascinated but not necessarily comfortable with what's going on, they might be interested in like my friend who I was talking about earlier, like how she does her healing work with both animal communication and the PEMF wave machine. And then I have people frequently ask like interesting work, like as far as my mediumship, my channeling, my intuitive readings, like, they find it absolutely fascinating, but they're not quite sure how to feel about how it happens. Like, how does it work? Because they don't know. And sometimes people are just afraid of what they don't know, So I've heard folks say, I would love a reading. Like this, I've heard a number of times. So if you're a reader or an intuitive person or a channel who does more energy psychology versus complementary medicine kind of stuff, so it's like complementary energy psychology stuff, which is what I consider what I do, coaching. Obviously we're not clinicians, but coaching, intuitive work, any sort of channeling, card reading, because I think people misconstrue what they are. That's like they have this Hollywood notion of it being very like fortune tellery, where it's actually more about self-discovery and transformation work. So the reason I think they're afraid is that they have this Hollywood notion because they would say things like, oh, I would just love to do a reading, but I'm so afraid to do it. I can't tell you how many times I've heard that from folks that are, they're standing in a metaphysical shop saying this to me because they're interested and they're fascinated by everything around them, but they're just not quite sure what's going on. And so they're not quite sure. And some of the things that I'll just ask them, because I think it's kind of interesting and it's funny to talk to them. Because after a while, it's not so much they're afraid, like our perspective might be, oh, they're afraid because they think it's like, all these things we worry about, which is like getting burned at the stake or people saying it's negative or whatever. And that's really not the case. It's not about us. I mean, that's number one, what we have to remember. It's not about us. It's about them and how, they are perceiving things instead of how we think they're perceiving things. So it's interesting because when you talk to them, what comes out are things like, I'm afraid to get a reading because I have a secret you might see it that I don't want people to see and I don't want to deal with right now. Like that might be what it is. And then they might say, well, I'm worried that you might say some horrible tragedy is going to befall me, which is a very Hollywood notion. And that's generally not how things work. Or my deceased relative may come through and say horrible things, which again, that generally does not happen. I've been doing this since, I don't even want to tell you, because that would just, like, why would I pay so much money to dye my hair if I'm going to tell you how old I am? But let's just say my whole life. And I have never in a medium session had a deceased relative, even one who in their life was such not a happy person, or such kind of a toxic person, that the person who's the client is sitting there, maybe they had a soul contract with, and they had to navigate that situation for whatever reason. Even when it's that on the human side, they have never come through and been hateful. Never. So, but I get where these ideas are coming from, and it's from this Hollywood notion, where a lot of times it's kind of bullshit. So we want to make sure, instead of shooing away their fears, let's be a good hostess for them into our world. Like, think of it that way. We're being a hostess. So it's not really, when we're a hostess, right? When we're hosting things, whether it be a dinner at our home or any sort of thing where we're hosting, you welcome people in, and you want to create a space that they feel welcome and safe, and that they want to hang out in. So I want to share, based on my three methodologies: spiritual, practical, and no bullshit. So I'm going to go through some stuff that falls under those categories, so that I can support you in learning how to become that really great woo-woo parlor hostess. And again, it's not always going to happen at the shop that maybe you're a guest reader at, or in like your crystal parlor or whatever. You might be at the grocery store, you might be at Christmas or Thanksgiving, and these conversations come up. So it's not about the physical place that these things happen that you're being a good hostess. Think of it as you're creating an energetic space to be a good hostess, about inviting some of these woo adjacent muggles in and explaining how they can be comfortable in that space with you. And, it probably will expand their fascination, because they wouldn't be asking you questions unless they were fascinated. So from a spiritual perspective, so spiritual, practical, no bullshit, right? Spiritual, make sure when these people are talking to you that you're actively listening. Remember, it's not about you. You know all about your woo-woo shit. If you are in my orbit and you are doing your thing, you know your shit. You are either on the path, or you're like, I always say, like, there's baby woos, there's like teenager woos, and then there's woos that are just in their expansion. And wherever you are in your journey, you know your shit. Otherwise, you would not be there. They, however, don't know what's going on, but they are fascinated by maybe your mood change, maybe how your perspective on the world has changed. And again, like we talk about, when we go through this stuff, you might lose some friends or family members because they're not on the same plane as you, and you're shifting your perspective, and that's okay. But when you draw new people in that aren't like full frontal woo-ness, and they see your change in how your perspective is, how it's more positive, despite maybe going through some harsh things, they might want to know, how are you getting through this? And that they're coming to you to ask. So being an active listener is really important, because you already know what you're doing. You already are on the path. You're saying to them, I'm not even inviting you. It's not going to be like you're in the South, like how I moved here from New York, and the first thing everybody's like, what church do you go to? Do you want to come to mine? And I was like, no. But thank you. But it's very much like, you don't want to be like that. So what we want to do is, actively listen to the person as they're talking. Ask them questions. Maybe ask, when they're saying what their fears are, deeply listen to their fears, their wishes, their thoughts, maybe their questions. This kind of thing creates a space for your super hero. A lot of people, and this is something I probably should speak to at some other point, about how stop using your empathness as a victim mechanism, because you're not. You are a super hero. Your empathy is your super hero power. Okay. So when you create a space through empathy for these folks to come and chat with you, and again, if you want to check out my video on energy clearing, again, being a super hero empath means you clear your energy on the regular. You don't claim that somebody else is putting their energy in you, blah, blah, blah. You manage your energy proper. Okay. So, but go watch that video how to do that when we're done here. But the thing is, your super hero power is your power of empathy to become activated so you can open this welcoming space for folks. And this will then kind of give you, when you have that kind of empath connection and you're listening to them, and it's so, and giving them permission to be in the space, okay, like however they show up, and you however you show up, it'll generate body language that's welcoming. Make sure you look them in the eye when they're talking and know how to read the room so that you know where they stand with things. Obviously, we're not going to jump right into talking about dimensional shifts and timeline jumping and all that kind of stuff and extra dimensional beings and all of this business with folks that are just kind of like, hey, how does the information come to you? You don't want to talk about all that in-depth, overwhelming stuff right in the beginning, right? So creating that spiritual safe place is more about listening to them deeply. And then as you create this empathic space with them, it can alleviate a lot of their fears so that they can allow you to maybe work with them in their healing process. So like when you create that loving space for folks and you let them know it's really not about you, you're a facilitator. It's about them. It's about their healing. It is about their, self-discovery, their self-reconnection, their transformation. That is what we do and how we facilitate those things. That creates that spiritual connection between you and them, and that spiritual space where you can be a good hostess, inviting them into the world with you. So a more practical approach. So now we're on to step 2, practical, spiritual, practical. Find some common ground, right? Like, when you're in your woo circles, you're probably very charming and don't feel socially awkward. So kind of tap into that and think to yourself, in the 3D world, because we chose to be here. Let's be honest, it's not always every day that we're like, yay, I chose to be here, or yay, I chose to be here. But the fact is that we did choose to be here. So we all have this common 3D experience. So the practical way to connect also with this person might be to share, instead of using like esoteric examples like we love to do when we're in our own company, maybe using examples that you can find in the 3D world can help you share how things work with them so that they get it and they can relate to it. So I often equate how I do things. I use 2 different 3D world explanations to explain to folks who are muggly or woo adjacent how things work. So I use computers and I use music, mostly because everyone, I mean, unless you're like in a cave or you're Amish, which if you are, you're not watching this because you don't have computers. But every one of us has a phone. We all have like our earbuds, we all are on the computer, all the things in one form of another. We've all had to download updates to our OS. We've all our operating system, downloaded apps, all this stuff. So it's a very common language. And so you might say to people something like, oh, instead of saying, wow, Spirit, gave me these messages last night while I was meditating and my third eye, okay, like even though to us, that sounds very normal. Like, oh yeah, totally gets you. Came in through your crown, your third eye opened that, unpacked that thing, and updated your operating. I get it, right? That sounds normal. But if you say that to like a muggle or a woo adjacent person, they might be like, chakra? What? Who? Download? And like you came into your head? What? So to kind of put it more to say, something like, oh, well, last night God downloaded some pretty sweet, info to me. Or, well, the way I receive information from, say, God or spirit, depending on who you're talking to, because everybody has a different name for like that which is the source energy. I would say, well, I receive information from God or spirit. It's kind of like how your iPhone can download an update, it's all downloaded, all boxed up. And then once you hit a button, it opens and you can read it. And that's how it comes in. So it's kind of like it downloads into my brain and then my brain unpacks it so that I can share that information with you, kind of like an app. And then people go, oh, okay, I get it. The other way that I use is music, because I've been a musician since I was probably 10, formally trained since 14. And because of that, spirit speaks to me more in music, which is interesting because a lot of my clients are creatives and they might not be musicians themselves, but they get music really well. And especially being in Nashville, Music City and all this kind of thing. So like, especially when I'm doing mediumship, they understand, like when I talk about the piano and the keys, like I say, this octave is your main immediate family. This octave over here would be your mom. This mom's side, this is your dad's side. These are what the keys like, because that's how spirit shows it to me on sheet music or in a key. Even when I teach the universal law course that I will be releasing shortly in the next couple of months, I give you all the outlines of the universal laws, but then the last three modules is all related to music. So the modules, the application modules of the universal laws are called unison, harmony, and dissonance, because that's an easy way to kind of explain it, because music and vibration. And you're using something that is common to everybody, computers and music, to explain this kind of stuff. Now, I will say this. If you do have somebody that you need to get a message to, because Spirit gave you the message, and I think we all know if we don't share messages sometimes, but you have this person in your life who is like not into what you do, they don't get it. James Van Praagh, who is a very prominent medium, been around forever. I loved how he kind of got around this so that you could share the information in a way that they are comfortable with without making them feel uncomfortable through whatever it was. So you might say something, because everybody has dreams, right? So you might go to them and say something like, hey, I had a dream last night about you, and this happened. I just wanted to share that with you because I thought it was interesting. I don't know if it means anything, but it was like weird because I never dream about you. So here you go. And that way, and you just leave it with them to do whatever. And usually you'll get a phone call back, but and you're like, oh my goodness, really? So anyway, but that's kind of more practical ways to deal with it. And kind of lastly, as you're doing stuff, I like to throw humor in. If you've ever worked with me, you'll know that I throw humor in every now and then. Like even yesterday when I was doing the New Moon Circle with the Celestial Soul Circle group, one of the examples of the energy of that new moon that happened yesterday. So if you're watching the replay, this is July of 2023, and we had a full moon in a new moon in Cancer yesterday. And I said the energy was kind of like, part of it was you knew you had to release something so you could move forward. But it was not the kind of release where you're like, shoo, I'm so glad that's over. Get the F out of my way so I can get on with my life. It was much more of like one of those things where it had been complete, like whatever it is that you need to release was, it's complete, but you don't want to let go because you just enjoyed it so much. And I equated it to like, okay, maybe it's like that favorite pair of leggings that whenever you put them on, you felt cozy and safe and comfy, and they saw you through so much crap in your life, like maybe with, they saw you through like moving, they saw you through like a breakup of your beloved, they saw you through, maybe a harsh job experience. Like they were your emotional support leggings, right? And then you've had them for like 10 years, and now they have a big old hole in the booty. So, you got to get rid of those suckers, because you're not going to wear them outside. You're not even going to wear them out to garden and outside. You can't even leave the house because they got a big old hole in the ass. So, you can't even give them to Goodwill to be like, oh, well, these served me well. Maybe they'll serve somebody else. No, they just got to go. So it's almost like you got to be copacetic with letting those leggings go. And so using that kind of humor as you're explaining stuff, like lighthearted, okay, to break the tension. So if you're feeling, as you're tapping into them empathetically, and you might feel them get a little bit tense about, like they may be all tense, that might be a moment for you to have a little lighthearted humor in there. Now, be sure that you do so where we're not doing any self-deprecation, like putting down self, or we're not making jokes at the expense of others. If you can keep things lighthearted that way and within that framework, that helps kind of keep their fears at a minimum as you navigate and share things from a practical perspective. Now, last thing, we've done spiritual, we've done practical. We're going to do the no BS. So I want this I want you to understand this is kind of super important. So as I said a few minutes ago, this is not a way for you to hide your gifts away from people. It's not an excuse for you to hide your gifts, because I know sometimes we are afraid of our own selves and we hide our gifts. And sometimes we're afraid of what other people might think and we hide our gifts. I want to be really clear. This is not a way for us to hide our gifts. This is more a way for us to, how do we be a good hostess in our space, in our energetic space of spiritual learning and self-discovery. And I also want to be clear about something else. There's always going to be naysayers. There's always going to be haters. Okay, these are not the people that I'm saying that you need to interact with in a way like this. Those folks, no matter how gracious and how awesome you are, they're never going to get it. And that's okay. They are not your people. They are not the people you need to exhibit energy on. When I'm talking about, so I'm talking about folks that are genuinely interested in what's going on with you and how it can benefit them, right? So the no BS in this part is don't put up with other people's bullshit. Okay, so if they're a naysayer or a hater, don't waste your time. We're talking about authentic people that want to know. Okay, so those are not your people, but I'm talking about folks that really genuinely want to know because they're fascinated, they're interested. They care about you as a fellow human, and they care about what you're doing because they're like, I wonder if like she's happy, even though there's like crap going on in her life. She seems to be navigating things okay, and I really would love that kind of peace in my life, right? So they're fascinated, they're interested, and they care about you as a human, and they also maybe want what you have, that kind of balanced energy you might be putting out there. So with that in mind, always be that authentic you. Always, always, always. No more bullshit, no more putting on airs, no more hiding. I'm not saying, unless it's truly your thing to crystal up and put glitter on your eyes and all that kind of stuff, if that's your authentic version of you, awesome. If you're more like me, like I rarely wear jewelry, I rarely wear makeup unless like it's showtime. I'm not that person, so I show up as me. I show up. I look like someone who I always look like someone who came out of a yoga class, I think, or at the garden or something. So, but whoever you are, however you love to show up, continue to do that. Do not temper that, because you're dealing with somebody or talking to somebody or know you're going to see somebody who is not necessarily a fellow woo that gets all that. Just keep doing yourself. You don't got to put on airs and you don't got to bullshit. Just do you. And that's all that matters, because people know when you're doing one or the other, and they know when you're authentic. It's in your energy. And as you stay true to yourself and true to your beliefs, if someone asks you a direct question, you can give them a direct and compassionate answer. And in my thought process, I also think it's, from the spiritual perspective, you're tapping in from an empathetic energy thing, what that means for you. Like, so sometimes people ask, what do you do for a living? And I just say, oh, I'm a life coach. And they don't ask any further things. So direct question, direct answer. If they say to me, well, what does that mean? Say, oh, well, I help people leap from their corporate jobs that they don't really love. I mean, if they love it, obviously they're not my people. But if they don't love it and they know there is something that resonates more with their soul, then I help them in that leap process. And that's the transformation that I support. That's why, life coaches help people transform from A to B. And so that's the kind of transformation I support people through. And that involves self-care, that involves self-confidence, self-belief, and all that kind of stuff, and self-rediscovery, reconnection, blah, blah, blah. So that might be what I say. If it's somebody that's much more like, well, how does that work? I mean, I know you have crystals. Like if they start digging a little deeper, I then will dig deeper with them. But I'm not going to either A, poo-poo them out the gate because they don't go further, and I'm not going to give them more information and overwhelm them, because they asked one small question. So that brings me to respecting boundaries. Just like we love our boundaries, we talk about boundaries all the time here. I feel like everything is boundaries, especially lately. But respecting those people's boundaries, that's part of what we do, right? I mean, we talk about boundaries left and right for ourselves, and we want to make sure that we're respecting boundaries of those who are interested in what we do. Because like, as soon as somebody's like, oh, I see you wear a crystal, and our ears perk up, we're like, friends, right? So we're eager to share all of the things with folks. Like, is this somebody that I can talk to about all this stuff and channeling and extra dimensional beings and stuff like that? Can I talk about manifesting and how I manifested like $5,000 twice in less than 20? Can I talk to them about that kind of stuff? Like, immediately we're all like, what's in it for me? But when we're dealing with somebody we don't really know, we want to make sure that we are not focused totally on how and what we can share, but more like, what do they want from us? Because if our goal is to be supportive of our folks that are new or interested or want to share that space with us, they might not be ready for a full frontal woo assault by us with all the trimmings. So we want to respect their boundaries. So just answer their questions directly without diving much deeper. Unless they go there, then it's okay. Always ask, though, before adding more information and sharing more deeply spiritual things. So it might be like, you might, how I was talking about before, you might know from your empathic tap in, oh, this is the person I just need to use like the I had a dream thing to let them know what's going on, because they totally will not get it. It would be too overwhelming. They are not in that space with me. But if it's somebody who's in the space with you, and maybe they're a new woo, and that's okay, and you're talking, and you're kind of meeting them where they are, and you might say something, but respecting boundaries looks something like this. Hey, I got a download from Spirit about you or for you last night. Is it okay if I share with you? Can I share it with you? And they might say no. And then it's okay. You'll be like, okay. And then Spirit knows you did your best, and that's it. I'm a firm believer in, like, when Spirit's like, go tell somebody something, I always will be like, okay, or they tell me to do something, I listen, because otherwise they get harsh, and it's like my Brooklyn relatives show up and they're like, okay, chop chop, let's get this done, and there's a lot of F-bombs and stuff. So yeah, I try to listen to them, but I also try to respect boundaries. So allow them, well, meaning the other person, not Spirit, allow whoever you're talking to express themselves as freely as you would like to have the freedom of expression. Okay, so even if they're disagreeing, even if they're saying, well, I don't believe that, let them, that's their business, right? You can be like, okay, cool, that's cool. We can all each have our own beliefs. That's totally fine. You're not my person. That's okay. You asked me, I shared, and if you don't agree, that's okay. That's it. I mean, I think it's really about, if we want to be accepted and have the freedom of expression that we like, we need to let others have that same freedom of expression. Because what happens is, yeah, for as many people who might disagree with what you're sharing, as not true for them, but it's true for you, we find as long as we're open, we probably will attract more folks that are more in agreement with us and are kind of saying, oh, maybe we'll travel this journey together. Maybe I can learn something from you. Maybe you can learn something from them, which I always find, like, whenever I say, I'm a coach or I'm here doing this thing, I learn as much from my people, from my clients. I like to call them peeps, because I feel like clients are so clinical, and I learn as much from y'all as you learn from me, and I'm so grateful for it. And I love the grace that comes with that. So if we can just all kind of be open and allowing, and not, argue over who's right, I think that's where a meeting of the hearts comes in. And so kind of just understand that most of this is really about being a good hostess in our space. Because if we're going to welcome in folks that need us, we first have to be a good hostess and create a comfortable, welcoming, safe space for them. So lastly, I think reading the room and respecting the energy of the room that you're in, the energetic room you're in with this person, that's important. If you're feeling that they're overwhelmed, you're starting to share things and they're kind of getting an expression like, what the, and they're overwhelmed, or their eyes get real big, just take a minute, step back and say, hey, what's going on with you? Is it, am I sharing too much? Because if I am, that's totally, I can back off. No, they might be opening their eyes real wide because they're like, oh my God, that's like opening my mind. But it might also be they're overwhelmed. So just read that room and remember to focus on how this is not so much, this practice shrouded in mystery, like how Hollywood puts it, all this crazy woo-woo stuff. But really, it's a way for us each to work on our own self-discovery, a way to reconnect with ourselves and our souls. It's a journey of transformation for all of us, and manifesting the lives we really love living. That's really the bottom line, is that that's what's going on. So I hope those tips and tricks kind of helped. I went over a little bit. I try to keep these to about 30 minutes. But I did want to share that because I think it's really important, because we all live in the 3D world together. Like I said, we chose to be here. Some days we're happy about it, and some days we're like, what the hell was I thinking? I guess it was like when I read my phone contract, or did not read my phone contract. I didn't read my whole contract when I came here. I just signed it and clicked agree, got down here. Sometimes it feels like that, right? But as we're doing that, and we still need to navigate and interact with other folks that maybe aren't on the same wavelength as us, or are shifting wavelengths, and and they end up in your circle. And being a good hostess to welcome them in is always really important. And even when it's somebody that's just visiting, that's really just like, you know what, I believe in what I believe, but I want to respect what you believe, and I want to understand it more so that I can be more understanding of what's going on with you. That's such a beautiful thing. So we want to honor that. And that's why I think some of these tips and I hate to use the word tricks because they're really not. It's just more like, here's how we use, instead of saying I'm socially awkward because I'm a woo-woo, say, you know what, I'm going to lean into my woo-woo-ness and use it as a superpower instead of saying, oh, well, I'm socially awkward. Well, you don't have to be. You can consciously choose to utilize what you would consider socially awkward and use it as being a good hostess into the energy of what we do. So I hope that was helpful. So I have 2 quick notes really before we go. I have 1 spot open in my private co-creative soul coaching 6-month program. If that's something that works with you, if you want to work together one-on-one on self-discovery, reconnection, so you can plan and begin your journey to full-time woopreneurship, or get ready to, like, while you're still working full-time, you want to launch that spiritual side hustle, but we need to get reconnected and rediscover who we are and what we want, even if you have an idea of what you're doing. And then how do I do that? How do I do that? Like, what are the basics that I got to get in place so I can do that, so that I can leap, I can make the leap and do the things that I want to do that are more soul aligned than maybe sitting in a cubicle or at home, all day attached to your computer. If that sounds like coaching sounds like a good idea for you, send me a quick email, or maybe go to my website and schedule a Let's Talk call so that we can discuss details. If that's something that resonates, I would love to work with you. Also, if you're more of a group person, who's again my brain is not working too much. There's no air in the energy this week. There's only water and feelings. So if you're a woman woopreneur or spiritual side hustler that loves the moon, self-care, and gathering with other woo-hearted lady bosses for self-care and moon celebration and learning some spiritual, practical, and no BS woopreneur tools, I would love to invite you to the Celestial Soul Circle, which is a membership that I have. We currently meet at least twice a month for moon circles, and then do pop-up workshops and have some other fun stuff that's coming down the pike as I can build it out. But it's in the description below if you're watching Facebook, and I think it's also, or maybe it's above, I don't know. It's also below if you're on YouTube. If you're on Facebook and you're not on YouTube, go to my YouTube and subscribe. At Soul Coach Studio is the name of this channel. And I am so grateful that you joined me today. And I'm so grateful that you're here. Oh, and I'm just moving some stuff out of the way and switching over. I realized there are comments. Hello, everyone. Good morning, Sharon. Good morning, Rumi. Good morning, Lisa. I haven't heard from you in a while, but I see you traveled and are fabulous, going all over the world. That's beautiful for you. I'm so excited. And I love you guys so much for joining me. Thank you for being here. And I will see you in the vortex until next time, which will be next week, next Tuesday. Yes. Hopefully there'll be more air in the air instead of all this water, because there's a whole lot of fields going on right now. But the air right now, having no air makes it hard to communicate, which is why I had a lot of notes that I was reading, but a lot of the watery fields. So be okay with being in the fields. I feel like there's a lot of resistance about being in the fields right now with a lot of water energy. But we also are in like a fiery moon, so it might be emotions and wanting to do things, and there's like all this stuff, but there's not a lot of ability to think about it. So it might feel a little off, but that's okay. Just be in your fields, eat some chocolate, get some grounding. We're all going to be okay. But for now, I love you so much. Have a great rest of your week. I'll see you next time. And until then, I'll see you in the vortex. Love you. Bye.